Up above, I heard, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Much louder voice. My Savior said, "Look at me. I'm a trolley car conductor. I just brought my son to see these Jewish people." Pause. From up above, "You must be stupid. It's almost curfew. Don't you know that patrols catch you on the street? They shoot on sight. Run home and pray you can get home before the patrols get you." That's the way I was gotten out. That's the way he got me out of the ghetto. He walked me home. There were some little side stories. He walked me home, got home, the place where my mother was hiding, dropped me off. For 80 years, I've been wanting to thanking him or his family. I can't. I never knew his name or his address or a family name.
Rozmowa prowadzona jest w języku angielskim. Naciśnij przycisk, aby włączyć napisy.
Could you please introduce yourself for also our viewers?
Well, it's a wonderful experience to be here and to speak with you. For me, when I'm asked my name, it's not so easy. I was born Adam Janusz Horowitz. During the war, we had many, many names, always ending in some Polish ending, some ski. At the end of the war, my name was Adam Janusz Horski. My uncle, who was in the United States, said that Adam was not an American name. He was wrong, but I wanted to be in America, so I became Alan. After we became naturalized citizens in the U.S., 1954, our parents told me to find us in Maine. We were still too afraid to publicly hold ourselves as being Jewish, so the Horowitz name was unacceptable. The Horsky name was a Holocaust name. We need to get rid of it. And I looked in the telephone book, when there were telephone books, and I found Hall, which was a very popular name, and that's how it became Hall. So my name now is Adam John Hall.
Could you tell when and where you were born?
Krakow, Poland, 1935, April of 1935.
Could you tell a little bit more about your parents, about their activities before the war?
Before the war, my father, who wanted to be an insurance executive, as a Jew, could not get a job in Poland. No Polish insurance company would hire a Jewish person, a Jewish Pole. And so he went to work for Riuniti, which is an Italian insurance company, and they didn't have the same problem. My mother was a professional violinist, and she played professionally. And we were yuppies before the term was ever coined. We were assimilated. I went to synagogue maybe twice before the war. Found it to be a very strange place with a bunch of old men davening, praying. But it was not familiar to me. And that was pretty much it.
Did you speak Yiddish in your family?
Not a word in my home of origin. Never heard Yiddish until I came to the United States.
So Polish was your language?
Polish, and of course, being so close to Russia and Ukraine, we knew a good bit of Russian. Both my parents spoke German, and I think most people in those days who were educated spoke French, a little bit of French, not fluent.
And what are your earliest memories from your childhood?
There are few and far between. I remember, for example, my parents' apartment, and you'd walk in the front door. There was a break front in front there, and there was, I think, the living room and dining room one way, and the bedrooms were the other way. I do not remember the people. I remember playing in my building with a little girl, and just shortly before the war started, her mother told me to leave and that I was a dirty Jew. And I had been there many, many, many times, and she's been in my apartment many times. And that was the first time I experienced anti-Semitism. I remember the park at the end of the street in Krakow. And I remember seeing a rose that was just so beautiful, and I wanted to bring it to my mother. And I knew I shouldn't pick a rose at public park, but I did. Policeman grabbed me and insisted on taking me to my home to teach me a lesson. And he did. And obviously, this was inappropriate treatment. But anyway, my mother realized what was happening. She thanked him for teaching me a lesson, gave him some small amount of money, and he went away. Those were the kind of things that I remember before the war. I remember my dad standing by the door of the apartment, arguing with my mother, and he finally said, "I'm leaving and you can stay if you want." And the argument was that he wanted to go to Lvov, Lviv now, where he felt more comfortable, where my mother and dad both were born in Lvov, and he still had family there in Krakow. My mother had her parents there and her sister. At any rate, the Germans were coming, and so we started walking, and my mother finally joined us. And we literally walked from Krakow to Lvov, crossed the Bud River.
But it's a very long way.
It's about 300 kilometers, I think,
Yeah.
maybe a little more. And yeah, we walked maybe 10 to 20 kilometers a day, knocked on a door in the evening, and some people were very hospitable. They gave us a place to sleep and then some food. Others perhaps just some meals, or maybe they let us sleep in a barn, and others just would turn us away, tell us to go away. But little by little, we made it.
And when you arrived to Lviv, and it was Soviet occupation, this period, how did life change compared to Krakow?
Well, that was a strange thing because my father had a lot of connections. My mother did not continue playing. She just stayed home and took care of me. We got an apartment very, very quickly. And in those days, that was very difficult. And surprisingly, my father got a job, not in the work that he was used to. He became a project manager in building a performance theater. And he had that job for probably a year and a half. So our life was pretty normal, except every day without fail, my mother would write a letter to her mother, to her father, to her sister, to her cousins, to her friends. And in 22 months, which was the time between Germany occupying Western Poland and then attacking the Soviets and occupying Eastern Poland, not one letter was ever returned to or returned to us or answered. And it is my belief that that my family was rounded up and sent to Plaszow, and that's why there was no answer. But I have no way of knowing. All I know is that there was no response. I'm glad my mother never found out, but I think most of our relatives were killed. They were all killed. Because if any of them lived, then from Plaszow went to Auschwitz, and that was that.
Did you have any problems with anti-Semitism in Lviv during this period?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember that. Once again, I think that we pretty much staying connected with my father's family. I had a grandmother there, and uncle and aunt and their families. There was a young boy, I was between 4 and 6.5. He was probably about 11 or 12. Richard. And I remember being here, of course, admiring that older boy. That's about all I can remember.
But I read in your book that your father was beaten on the street in Lviv.
One time when he was coming home, and he always carried a briefcase. Much of the time in the briefcase there was food, because early on we received a little card, like small postcard, and it said you had to leave everything in your apartment. Leave your apartment. You could take one small suitcase. Had to move to another address. When we went to the other address, we were surprised because there was already another family there. And we basically were being moved into the ghetto, but we did not know. There were no barbed wires, there were no fences, nothing. All of that subsequently, day after day, came up more and more. And my father kept on going to work, and he had a special pass to go in and out of the ghetto. In those days, the ghetto was pretty porous. And so if you wanted to, there were ways to sneak out. But we didn't. My mother and I stayed in our room most of the time and didn't. My dad came home. We usually had food in a briefcase. One time he was caught on the street, and he did not know whether it was the Polish people or the Jewish people or the Polish Christians. Probably was not Polish Jews, but it was maybe Germans. Somebody started beating him, and instinctively he covered the back of his head. He covered the back of his head. And when they were tired of beating him, and he protected himself, he went to somebody else, and he went and he left. Mm. Came home dirty with his suit torn. Yeah.
Yeah, and also you wrote about very frightening moment in your own life in the ghetto in Lviv. Could you tell a little bit more about this experience?
When my dad was coming home one day, somebody stopped him. I wasn't there, so I don't know, and told him there was going to be a roundup of children. My dad got a farmer to take me in and a railroad worker to take me there. The railroad worker showed up, and we were walking to the railroad station in the ghetto. A truck pulled up. We could not go further. Germans jumping off the back of the truck. I could see that. We went the other way, was also blocked off. I was on the street. I was the first child taken in that children's roundup. They picked me up, and I always thought until recently that I was taken to a police station. Now I think I was taken to the Janitsa concentration camp. And somehow, I don't know how, my father showed up, spoke to the commandant, saw me because I could reach over the barricade, recognized me, and then left. Several hours later, he came back, spoke to the commandant again, gave him something, and this time the commandant just walked away. My dad looked at me the way I'm looking at you. Just like that. I knew what that meant. I knew where the door was. I left the compound where the children held, and we walked out of there. Till this day, I feel sure that I'm the only child to survive from the dozens, if not hundreds, of children.
How it was to be a child during the war, during Holocaust?
Well, that's when I started feeling afraid. When I saw how afraid my parents were, then I understood, and children understand a lot more than we adults think that they do, that I should be afraid. And I remember practicing to hold my breath as if I was dead. I remember looking everywhere as I went for a hiding place. And that's where I learned to be afraid. That's when I learned to be afraid.
Mm. You moved to Warsaw with your parents in 1942. Why?
Well, because my parents decided that my parents decided that it was too dangerous to be Jewish. So my dad knew where there were people who made false identifications. We got false IDs to indicate that we were Christian Poles, not Jewish Poles. We snuck out of the ghetto and we started to be on the Christian side. But they were always afraid that somebody would recognize them. And so, because people knew them and involved, that was their hometown, we went to Częstochowa thinking that people would know him. Couldn't find a place to live there. And then subsequently moved to Warsaw. And there we did okay. I'm here.
Yeah. But before this moving to Warsaw, you also had hiding places in Lviv, right?
At first, we were going to hide in a ghetto. And there was my dad, and first hit us above the ceiling. You know, most places I'm looking at you sitting right here now, there's usually a drop ceiling. There's a space between the roof and the ceiling, or the floor above and the ceiling. And that was our first hiding place. It was quite adequate until a maintenance worker found us there. And once anybody found out about us, we had to leave. Then we went to a factory. It's a long story. But two engineers and my father persuaded the Nazis that they could make synthetic leather. And the way they did that is by grinding up real leather into fine particles. And then they would put resin around it. So if you look at it carefully, you can see the leather, you can see the resin, etc. The Germans said, fine, make a factory. The only purpose of that factory is to give us a hiding place. And so for about a month or two, we hid not in the factory, but not even in the basement, but sub-basement. Below the basement, there was another large room, and that's where we hid. But the engineers had relatives, and my father had friends, and so people started coming in. So we were maybe amongst the first 4 or 5, maybe 6 people there. Then there became 10 people, and more people kept on coming, and 20, and more people came, and maybe 50, and more people came. I had about 75 people, and it was a large room, so the space was there. But so much food had to go in, so much human waste, because all we had to do was a potty had to go out. And there was so much whispering and body heat that we knew sooner or later the Nazis would go and find us. Even though above us, the engineers and my father spread ox blood all over the floor. So the Nazi brought dogs. They could take one whiff and the dogs were done. But we knew that sooner or later it was not going to work. So we left there. And that's when we started to hide on the other side, on the Christian side.
How it was for you as for child, this hiding place with a lot of people?
Well, it was always difficult because I knew I was hiding, because I knew I was scared, because I knew I was supposed to be scared. And when we were hiding, there were no schools then, not that I knew of. And so my mother and I stayed in the room the whole time. And we would never walk out. And it was like a prison. And my father would go make some money, do whatever's necessary, come back with a little bit of food, day after day after day. That was our life. Until we left Warsaw, same thing. And it was going reasonably well. Actually, sometimes my father would go to one place or we'd go to a different place. Until one landlady never said a word to us. And she could have easily said to us, leave, and we'd be gone, because all we had is one small suitcase. At any time, we never unpacked. To this day, I never unpacked. And we would run out and be gone in 30 seconds or less. She didn't. She called the police. The Polish police came. Not mean, not nasty. They said, we have a report that you may be Jewish. Come with us. And they brought a doroshki, a taxi, but
Yeah.
his horse-drawn carriage. My mother and I sat facing backwards, right next to the driver. They sat in the comfortable seats facing forward. And we stopped in front of the building, and I was a child, so I'm looking. It was almost a thing. One of the police officers went inside for instructions. The others stayed with us to make sure we didn't run away. I never saw a German looking at us. We were not told to come into the building. Nobody asked me to see whether I was circumcised or not. Could have been a Christian. They said, go across the street to Umschlagplatz. That was the railroad station at the edge of the Warsaw Ghetto, from where the trains were to Treblinka.
Yeah.
And the cab driver took us there. No beating, no nothing. We got out. We entered through a door, because there was a door. And we were very, very early on. So there was almost nobody there. The train must have just left. And there was a station house, as best as I remember. It was on the right side. It could have been left, but as best as my recollection was on the right side. We went inside. No problem. There were benches. We sat down on a bench. For the next several nights, that's where we slept. We were there for 2.5 days. And the trains did not run to Treblinka. It only happened one time. It was like August 28th through September 2nd. Mm. I always thought, because that later on in my adult time, that Treblinka had too many bodies or something. I found out that the Nazis wanted to make the gas chambers more efficient, more productive, so they could kill more people faster. And during those 5 days, they were increasing the capacity of the gas chambers. We knew nothing about that. And I found playmates. And for me, it was fun. I could run around. I could play tag with them. We yelled. And the Jewish police and the Polish police and the German police all thought that we were pain. There this disruption. And more people kept on coming and keep on bumping into people. And so they had some special permission. And as best as I can remember, there were 30 to 60 children that walked hand in hand, 2 by 2, some adults in front and back. And we walked very, very short distance, maybe 3 blocks, to an orphanage in the ghetto. And there I spent about a month in the orphanage, very happy. The adults were very kind and gentle. And the other children were just like me, somewhat traumatized, but we could run, and they would let us run, they would let us play. In those days, I never complained about the food. Whatever was given to me, I would eat. And to this day, I am not a foodie. You put food in front of me, I'll eat it, and I'm ready for the next activity. And food is not important to me. It's just a way of living. And so I was happy in the orphanage, and a small man, a very small man, maybe 5'2", maybe, I don't know in terms of meters, but not 2 meters, much less than 2 meters, came in a uniform, and he had a uniform of a trolley car conductor. And he said to me that he was there to take him to my parents. I would not go. I trusted nobody, and least of all somebody in uniform. He tried and he couldn't convince me. And he had to make sure that I was willing. Finally, he spoke to the people in the orphanage. I do not know what they said. They, whom I trusted and loved because it was so nice to me, took me outside. And next thing I know, I could not go back inside. They were inside. I could not go back. And here I was alone with this man. First thing he did, put a cap on my head, pulled the brim way down. And he said, whatever you do not look up. And of course, the point of the hat covered up most of my face. Then he said, hold my hand and do not let go. I chose my left hand. And he said, don't say a word. I know a lot of people used to say to me, keep quiet. So that I was used to. And I remember we walked down the street. I think it was a main street of the ghetto, a big street. I don't remember looking left or right. I really remember coming up to a pedestal. All I saw was a pedestal and a pair of black boots. From up above, I heard, who are you? What are you doing here? Much louder voice. My Savior said, look at me. I'm a trolley car conductor. I just brought my son to see these Jewish people. Pause. From up above. You must be stupid. It's almost curfew. Don't you know the patrols catch you on the street? They shoot on sight. Run home and pray you can get home before the patrols get you. That's the way I was gotten out. That's the way he got me out of the ghetto. He walked me home. There were some little side stories. He walked me home. Not home, the place where my mother was hiding. Dropped me off. For 80 years, I've been wanting to thank him or his family. I can't. I never knew his name or his address or a family name. The only way I can say thank you is to tell people that there were Christians who risked their life. Maybe got no money, but who risked their life to save a Jewish boy. And I was more difficult than a girl because I was circumcised. So at any given moment, the Germans could have found out. Yeah, he was a dead man if they found out. But he did.
Yeah, I would remember about Warsaw Ghetto, about like streets of Warsaw Ghetto, because it's a very interesting period after so-called Gross Action.
It is my recollection that we children in the orphanage, by the way, this is 3 weeks after Korczak's orphanage already went to Treblinka.
Yeah, I read that you understood like after the war that it wasn't Korczak's orphanage because you thought that it is.
Because the adults were so nice to me, I thought it was probably Korczak's orphanage. No, now I know better because I checked the time.
Yeah.
And Korczak was dead already and his children were dead. I think the adults in my orphanage knew that it was sooner or later our time would come. And they were just as nice as could possibly be. They would never yell at us. They would never beat us. They would be patient. And we were children, you know, sometimes we weren't so good. And when the man came and wanted to save me, they said, sure, absolutely yes, because they knew that being stayed in the ghetto was death. The entire time I was in the orphanage, I stayed either in the building or in the yard around the building. I never once went outside. Whether they didn't let me, I'm not sure. All I can tell you, I never saw what was going on in the streets. When we walked to the guard station, I did not look to the left or right. I did what I was told, kept my mouth shut. And I realize now that when he had the hat over my forehead, when the guard was standing looking this way, he could not see very much of my face. But I did not know then.
And when did you leave Forsugetto and escape to the Aryan side?
Well, the man took me to the Aryan side, and my best guess, it was probably October, or late October, early November, but that's just a guess,
Okay.
of 42.
Mhm.
And that was about the time that the liquidation, as best you're a historian, I'm not, as best as I could tell that, but I never saw any of that.
Mhm.
The only time I saw that was excuse me, wait a minute, I'm not true. When I was taken to Umschlagplatz, I saw the results because I saw people coming in waves, coming into the Umschlagplatz. And I have no idea whether after 2.5 days, whether there were 2,000 people or 10,000 people there, but it was thousands. There was almost railroad stations in Europe, as you well know, are very big places. It was almost shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, I would like to ask you about your father because your father tried to change his identity and to create a Christian Paul. Yeah, so also with help of surgery. It's very
Well,
interesting.
probably just before we left Lvov, my dad was a person who knew no strangers. Everybody was his friend. He went to a physician who was his friend for the youth. How close I don't know. I wasn't there. And he had a nice face, but he had a big bulbous nose. In English, we call it a real hunker. And it was the way the Nazis depict the Jews with big bulbous noses. He says, "You see this? This is my death warrant.
Mm.
Give me a rhinoplasty, a nose job." Doctor said, "You're crazy. No Jews permitted in the hospital. No Jews were not even permitted on a trolley car." So my father said, "Do it at your home." The doctor said, "I can't. I don't have an assistant. I don't have an anesthetic. I don't even have a full set of tools." They went back and forth, and finally my father said to him, "I have a 7-year-old son. His existence depends on mine. If I die, he dies." My father said to him, "I understand that what I'm asking for you is a lot. I don't know whether he was a plastic surgeon or not, but it was difficult. But you will know if you don't at least try, you will know for the rest of your life that a 7-year-old child died because you refused to try." And that Christian physician, that was a little more than he was able to do, to live with. That night, my dad went to his house with a half a bottle of vodka, and he drank it rapidly. That was his anesthetic. And he held a tray right here to catch the flesh coming out of his nose.
Mm.
And with the other hand, he handed the tools because the doctor needed somebody to help him. He only had 2 hands. And then my dad could see and could hear pieces of a nose falling into the pan. And when it was done, my father never went to see the doctor again. And the nose job, the plastic surgery, was a brilliant success and an utter failure.
Mm.
Was my father pretty? No. He looked like a retired boxer. Flat hair, his nose spread out, until he went into his grave looking like that. But he did not have that bulbous nose. To finish the makeover, he went into a bathroom, and I saw this, with black hair. He came out with a blonde, and he said, "If women can dye their hair, why can't I?" He spoke German brilliantly. because he was educated in German. So with his Viennese like accent, German, blonde hair, fighter's face, he, for the rest of the war, he could socialize with Nazis, no problem.
Hmm. And on the Aryan side, you also had a hiding place. It's a very important part of your war experience because this hiding place was in so-called Drapacz.
Well, we were never really comfortable. We never felt safe because once one lady turned us in, others could also. But we still continued to move from place to place, etc. As I said before, my father socialized with Nazis. One time, one of the Nazis was complaining that he had a two-room suite of offices in a Prudential building, then called Drapacz, and that he didn't have a need for the space. He knew that most of that building was occupied, and not all, by German companies. So he nonchalantly said, I could use that space. I have a small factory. We'll take it off your hands. Actually, he sublet it. And each month he paid the Germans some rent, and the German paid to whoever the authorities were. And for 2 years, we stayed in that office, never came out, and during the entire workday, we stayed in a closet. My mother and I could not communicate except if I got very close to my mother, literally mouth to ear. I could speak to my mother by harsh tones. On our laps, hers and mine, there was a pillow, each of us. So if I had to cough or she had to sneeze or whatever, head in the pillow to absorb the sound. Never once did we sit on the pillow. Couldn't. Next to us was a potty. So if we had to go to the bathroom, that was it. And the only other thing is we had a string. A little white string that the bakers used to tie up a box. Thin white string. And we would play cat in the cradle. That's the only thing we do. I'm sure I stood on my knees. So then we would have the string, the loop between her and me, and would make patterns. That's the only thing. The only way we could breathe is there was about this much space under the door so that we could get enough air in and out. Never once did we come out of that closet until 5:45, 6 o'clock. And by 8 o'clock, so by 7:30, we were in the closet. But maybe by 7. I didn't have a closet. I didn't have a wristwatch. What was interesting is emptying the potty was a real problem because there was a toilet in the front office. So my dad could take the potty, but he could not empty it until 7:30, 7:45, as though early in the morning somebody came in, or 5:45, maybe 6 o'clock, as if somebody was working. Likewise, he would leave every morning. When everybody's coming to work, he would go, leave. At night, everybody's taking the elevator down. Still the same 2 elevators are there. It's now, as you know, Warsaw Hotel, or Hotel Warsaw. Very nice place. He would always go opposite everybody else. So he knew that was dangerous because people would notice. In a high-rise building, everybody takes the elevator. He walked the stairs. So he walked 13 floors down. He walked 13 floors up. It made no difference when he was sick and he had tuberculosis during that time. He still had to walk up the 13 floors. It was life or death.
And what were you eating during this period? In which way?
In any way my father could make money to buy food in the black market, he did. But sometimes he was not lucky. Fortunately, upstairs on a 15th and 16th floor, the top two floors, was the Luftwaffe headquarters, the German Air Force headquarters for the country of Poland. And that was like any headquarters of any military, 24 hours a day, every day, no break. And sometimes they would throw food out. Not always, but sometimes when we were really short of food, my father would go down to the ground floor, looking at garbage cans, and particularly the rotten potatoes and the potato peelings. We had a little bit of oil, and we'd take the potato peelings, cut away the real bad stuff, and we would make potato pancakes out of that as best as we could. And whatever there was, we ate. And I still remember very clearly today the frozen potatoes. Sick, sweet taste. Awful. It was there, I would eat it. You can ask my wife, both of my wives. If you put food in front of me, I will eat it and not complain. And I'm done.
Did you see Warsaw Ghetto Uprising from Prudential? Because it's very high.
We could never during the day come out, but early in the evening, we could come out maybe like 6 o'clock in the evening, and never stand by windows so people don't see us. But you stand back 3 or 4 feet, from the outside people cannot see. And we were on the 13th floor, so most buildings were below us. We could see out of a corner the German troops just once or twice forming columns in order to march to the ghetto. We could see that. We could hear the explosions. We could smell the smoke. But our windows were turning towards the Vistula River, and the ghetto was behind us over my left shoulder. We could never see in that direction.
How long were you in Prudential with your mother?
I'm sorry?
How long?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, we were in a closet for 2 years.
And how did you and your mother survive also mentally during this period?
Survive mentally?
Yeah.
We were scared. And when you're scared enough, you can survive mentally. There were no choices. It was either that or die. One of the more difficult parts of my life is to stop thinking of like a computer, on or off, life or death. Because during the war, I was trained life, death, whatever's necessary, you do to live. Example, when we were walking to the drop arch, to the Prudential building, I just happened to have an infected foot. And my parents said to me, I had to wear, in Poland in those days, boys wore boots up to the ankle.
Yeah.
I had to put my boot on. So it was awful. My foot was swollen, pussy, red, very painful. They said, no, you got to put it on. And I asked them, can we cut off the tip of my boot? They said, no, people will notice. And our job was not to be noticed. Finally, with a lot of pain, I put the boot on. And then my parents said to me, we cannot limp. You have to walk normally. And we probably walked 2 or 3 kilometers, maybe more. I never limped. I never complained, never cried. And we arrived in the drop arch and walked up the 13 floors because we never took the elevator. My parents tried to take the boot off. The pain was just, they couldn't. Slowly, with a lot of effort, we took it off. The boot was filled with blood and pus, but I never limped. Life or death, how much do you want to live? I want to live a lot. I still want to live.
And could you tell us about the stories your father invented? Hoka Boka Doka?
Oh my goodness. At night, we could come out of the closet. and all we had was some old newspapers. So our mattress on the floor were old newspapers, and the only blanket we had was old newspapers. So at night, lying together, the three of us, my dad knew that he had to do something to keep me quiet and satisfied. So every night he would tell me a story about a kingdom called Hoka-Boka-Doka, and about a king. Obviously, he was the king, and the queen was my mother, and I was the prince. And my poor father, every once in a while, wanted to slightly change the story. And I insisted that every night, same story. And he did it. And I started writing a children's book recently about the kingdom of Hoka-Boka-Doka. And I did about 3 or 4 chapters. And then, to my shock, somebody came out with sneakers called Hoka. So I may see them.
And what do you remember from the time of the Warsaw Uprising from 1944? Because Drapacz, it's very, very important building for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Drapacz, we did not know, was in the very epicenter of the uprising. We did not know.
Yeah.
We were in the closet, and we could smell the smoke, we could hear, and we knew what was going on, but we were not coming out of the closet. And maybe September 1, maybe September 5, I don't know exactly. Early September, only pretty close to the end of it. The only person that ever opened that closet door, and before that, there were maintenance people, came in the front door, front office, saw there was nothing there, left. A few came into front and back office. But in 2 years' time, nobody ever looked in the closet. But this security person, no. This area warden, opened every door, and he found us in the closet. And we kept on telling him we were perfectly happy, we're safe. He said, no, you got to go down to the bomb shelter. Well, up until about a year ago, I thought he almost cost us our lives, because for us to join the predominantly Polish population was very dangerous. And we had no papers by this point. We sat in the closet for 2 years. But we could not argue with him. We wound up going down to the basement of the Drapacz building. There were long rooms with benches on each side. We sat down. There were hundreds of people there. I don't remember about the food or anything. But after a day or several days, I cannot tell you, the building shook. And there was such dust you couldn't breathe. And when the dust settled, it took maybe half an hour, 15 minutes, I don't know. About 30 feet, maybe about 10 meters from us, not very far, we saw the body of an artillery shell. It was the largest artillery shell ever produced up through today, even today. The Germans used to have a cannon on top of a railroad car, and they would just lob these shells in. How that shell penetrated the entire building, I do not know, but it did. We did not know it was a delayed fuse weapon or what. We had to leave. And so, with the help of the Polish underground, that was in charge of that area then, we went from column to column. We went underneath barricades. The barricades were so high, on our hands and knees, because up above the roofs were snipers. So you could never stand up. And we wound up in another bomb shelter. There, for the first time, in this other bomb shelter, my mother and I were separated. My mother went to one area where she was taken.
But your mother was pregnant, yeah?
I'm getting to that. I did not know.
Okay.
Because, for those days, to have a swollen belly was not unusual because of lack of food.
Mm.
So she had not much. She had just a little bit bigger belly. So she went to down the living room. I was forced to go to another space with the general population. And I would look for my mother. It's interesting. I can still tell you it was to the right. And they dropped a sheet between us. Well, she was taken to what used to be a coal bin, and I was taken to what used to be a basement. There was no more coal. And that's where my baby brother was born. I didn't even know she was pregnant. When people asked me, and I would sleep with my parents every night, when did she get pregnant? And I said, no. It was immaculate conception, just like Jesus, my brother. My brother was born from no man, because I was with my mother the whole time.
Mhm.
After my mother gave birth to my brother, I thought that I was going to die, because a newborn child, everybody looks at a newborn child. And we always managed to survive, but nobody noticing us. Now, we're going to be a cause to celebrate. I was exactly wrong. My brother was a very strange child. He was not supposed to live. His birth weight was less than a kilo.
Mm.
He was tiny. And my mother had no milk. There were no women that had milk. There were no animals. So one physician said, well, maybe, give him some sugar water and see if that works. My brother for months survived on sugar water, just a spoonful every half hour. And this child that was supposed to die wouldn't die. And so a doctor, wanting to save this miraculous child, put us on a hospital train out of Warsaw. And we didn't know where we were going. We wound up back in Krakow. And so my brother was the cause for our survival. Had we not got that train ride, we would have had to go through a checkpoint, and either we get shot at the checkpoint or we sent to a concentration camp. Either way, we would have died. And this little baby still was the reason why we survived.
Yet you have just an incredible story.
Well, it's a series of miracles, at least I believe.
Yeah.
My brother was a very special person. He died on his birthday, on his 75th birthday.
Mm.
And he established a legal concept, which was never before, that anybody who's hurt by an act of terrorism and if that person is an American, doesn't have to go sue and wherever the event happened, can sue an American court and doesn't sue the terrorists, but now they're all dead, can sue the country that sponsored the terrorism. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's a lot of difficulty in proving it, but if they can be proved, and my nephew, his son, still does that work. It's brilliant work. It's wonderful. It's rewarding. And he developed that whole area of law. We're all lawyers. My wife is, I am, my daughter, his son, my granddaughter, 2 son-in-laws who are lawyers.
Okay. What do you feel now when you see Drapacz in modern Warsaw?
Wonderful. I feel like my mother every night used to say something which did not necessarily make sense then, but it really makes sense to me today. She would whisper in my ear, "We won." What do you mean we won? We can't even move. People are running. We won. Every night, we won. But what she was saying is this: the Nazis were expending endless resources to fight us and to kill us. And we were still there. Mm. From her point of view, we won. Mm. And now that I'm 90, I believe, yes, that I won. What do I see when I see that building? I feel joyous. And there I survived. When I actually, that closet is still there. They reconfigured it. Still there. When I stepped in our closet, I had no negative feelings.
Mm.
We did whatever we had to do to survive. We never hurt anybody else, but we survived as best as you could.
How did this experience involve on your whole life later?
For many years, I had what I call, that's another technical word. I had free floating fear. No reason to be afraid, but all of a sudden I'm uncomfortable, etc., etc. I saw several psychologists, and that after years of treatment, I've learned to deal with it. But I've had a lot of psychotherapy to help me.
Mm. Is it possible to have like a normal life after such experience?
I would like to think yes. Yes. I've been very lucky. I have been married twice to two wonderful women. Nothing, no complaints. I have two marvelous daughters by birth. I'm very proud of them. And two terrific grandchildren from one of them. My second wife brought into my life my third daughter, and she's as good as the other two. So I'm very happy, and professionally, there's always a problem here and a problem there, but I've always managed to make it all work out. So I've been successful professionally, very successful as far as family, and it's not all my doing, or people around me have helped me. So I'm a very happy, satisfied person.